What's up guys, it's Will here, back again. And today we're here to detail the worst 20 Hot Toys figures of all time. I really want to jump straight into this list, no foreplay. I don't think we need a major introduction for this video because I don't want to waste any time going over these figures, but I do want to throw a brief couple disclaimers out there. Firstly, of the 20 figures on this list, if you own any of these figures and you love them and you have them in your display and you feel really great about it, fantastic. I'm not trying to yuck your yum. I'm not trying to say you have bad taste or you're a bad collector. Art is very subjective, and for me, these figures just don't quite hit the same as they do for you, unfortunately, but it isn't to say that your opinion is wrong or invalid. These are just my worst 20 Hot Toys figures, and you are entitled to your own opinions. And of course, you can let me know in the comments down below if you disagree with any of my takes. We'll get to that. But the second thing is I have somewhat arbitrarily limited this list to the last 10 years of released Hot Toys figures. So if a figure was produced and released over a decade ago, I decided to exclude it from this list because if we did that, all of the figures would come from that time period. At number 20, we have the Hot Toys, the life-size Grogu, the child from the Mandalorian TV series on Disney+. Now, this figure was a little bit controversial because there was a Sideshow statue that exists that was direct competition. Sideshow's is more of a statue, this is more of an articulatable figure, and this Hot Toys figure also had some QC issues, which we're going to talk about. I think overall, Hot Toys did a decent job with the likeness. I see a resemblance to Grogu here. I think overall, the life is in the eyes. And I do see life there. I do think the ears, swappable ears, you can see the ear seams, was a huge miss. Over time, I started to soften on this, but then my stance started to swing back like a pendulum, like a seesaw. I started to go back and forth a little bit on this, a little bit flip-floppy, but I will say that I don't like that the swappable ears have that visible seam. I don't think swappable ears was really necessary. I think, you know, having one set of ears would have been sufficient, but the fact that Hot Toys gave us that, some collectors like the expression to, you know, change out the ears. I'm not a fan of that. I would rather choose the realism. I don't need to change out the ears. I'm probably never going to do that. That said, I do think overall the likeness is decent. I think the Sideshow one is probably on par. I kind of go back and forth on which one is better, but I think overall Sideshow probably produced the better of the child figure, if only you could adjust it and move the head around like the Hot Toys. You have to remember this is $410. $410 for this life-size figure, and you also have to remember a lot of the QC issues that were happening at the time. So again, we want to take a look at a photo here. Shout out to Easy Company Collectibles. This is a photo that he posted forever ago, way back in the day on you know, his Facebook and socials. And this is just one example of the chin cracking. So the silicone on the chin was cracking as people were articulating the jaw. You could open or close the mouth, and a lot of these figures ended up being damaged because people were articulating the jaw either too far or extending it or whatever the case may be, and that was a continuous problem. So there was also an example I found actually of a YouTuber that actually had the same type of situation going on, the chin cracking. So this common issue is so problematic that it creates a mass QC problem that really makes collectors a little bit skittish in terms of purchasing this figure. And it really diminishes the quality of the collectible itself. There were just some QC issues associated with these figures that were problematic. And for me, it's like, that's a problem. So I don't love when a figure does that with Hot Toys. The QC is one of, I think, their bright spots, one of their strengths. And you can see some issues with the eyes as well from another collector. So these are isolated cases, it's 3 examples, but there are other ones out there as well that really brought this figure down quite a bit. So for me, I gotta say, this one is a huge disappointment. It's a huge L. I don't see Hot Toys making another life-size Grogu anytime soon, but for me to compete directly with Sideshow and lose, that makes it one of Hot Toys' worst figures. At number 19, we have the Hot Toys Batman Begins Batman. Now, this figure set the collecting world into a little bit of a frenzy because there are a lot of diehard Batman collectors out there and a lot of Nolan trilogy fans, obviously, considering Hot Toys keeps remaking every version. But Hot Toys has done justice, I believe now, to the Dark Knight version and, of course, the Dark Knight Rises version with an armory for each one, respectively. But Batman Begins has not gotten quite the same level of love and commitment. The suit texture is a little bit off, as is the cowl. The head sculpt isn't that great for Bruce Wayne either. The new versions have a little bit of an improvement in those regard, just, you know, giving Bruce Wayne and Christian Bale a little bit stronger of a likeness. Here, this looks very much like Hot Toys' older work. This looks like a figure that was made in, you know, again, like 2010, 2015, something like that. And the suit texture is just not quite right. The cowl is a little bit off in its shape. It's not quite shaped in a proper way based on the film accuracy. And of course, you have the texture of the suit, which is a little bit problematic as well. And the cape is pretty ass. This is not one of Hot Toys' best capes. It doesn't flow properly. It doesn't look as good. This is just one I think that disappointed a lot of collectors. Do some collectors still have it and are they happy? Sure. But at the end of the day, I mean, look at that cape. Yeah, it's just, and Hot Toys can do way better with capes. They've shown it with figures like Moon Knight. And of course, this Batman Begins figure, the paint applications aren't always that strong. The texture of the suit, the inaccuracies. I think you have a combination here that's just not quite on par with other Dark Knight Hot Toys offerings. And this is an important suit for a lot of collectors. This is one that a lot of collectors view as the best film in the trilogy and the best suit in the trilogy. Not me, I'm more of a Dark Knight guy, but there are collectors out there who are really, looking forward to, getting a Batman Begins that's good. So Hot Toys has yet to deliver that. At number 18, we have the Hot Toys Avengers Infinity War Hulkbuster. Now, guys, this is not the Hulkbuster you're looking for. Avengers Age of Ultron Hulkbuster, the one that's actually iconic and definitive and is an amazing work of art as a figure, is the one you're looking for. This one is a power pose. It has a weird material, doesn't have die cast. It doesn't have anywhere near the presence of the original Hulkbuster. And to me, this is just one of those Infinity War figures that just doesn't quite stack up to what figures look like nowadays. Even at the time, a lot of us collectors were like, I'm not sure I'm really feeling this one. This is really not that definitive of a representation. I don't think Hot Toys did a great job bringing it to life here compared to the Age of Ultron Hulkbuster, which is one of the best action figures ever made, probably, with the size and the detail and just the ability that it has to articulate. It's pretty wild. And this Hulkbuster just very much pales in comparison. And at number 17, we have the Hot Toys Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 Thanos. So this Thanos just pales in comparison to the other Thanoses. Point blank, that's as simple as it needs to be. You have the Avengers Infinity War Thanos and of course 2 different Endgame Thanoses, Battle Damage and Regular, all of which are vastly superior to this one. The armor construction is not nearly as detailed. The paint application is not as shiny, it's not as metallic looking as the other figures. It doesn't have quite the paint applications on the head sculpt. The scaling is way off compared to what Thanos actually ended up looking like in the Avengers films. You have a throne, which is pretty cool, and I'm glad that they made this for collectors who wanted a Thanos at the time, but this figure just really pales in comparison to the other Thanos offerings, and that is a huge problem, unless you want to have every single Thanos. If that's the case, I think that makes sense, but the fact that the scaling is off, the armor doesn't have the detail as the other Thanos figures, I don't think the head sculpt looks as good as the other Thanoses. This is what he looked like in Guardians of the Galaxy, I get that, so the Hot Toys recreated that pretty accurately, but it's not accurate to what Thanos actually ended up looking like in the future installments, in the iconic installments for that matter. And next up, we have the Hot Toys Iron Man Mark 26 Gamma version. So guys, what do I really need to say about this one? Unless you're a diehard Iron Man collector, a completionist of sorts that needs to have every single Iron Man figure that has ever been created, I don't see why you would add this one to your collection when there are so many other Iron Man offerings that are superior to this one. Yes, it has a green color scheme. Yes, it's a little bit unique. It's from a kind of throwaway scene in the Iron Man 3 film. It's just, again, Hot Toys wants to make every single Iron Man that exists, particularly at the time that this one was produced. But again, if you're just thinking about the other options on the market and what this one looks like, no one's going to look at your collection and say, wow, you have the green Iron Man. That respect, right? Like, if you love that figure, great. But to me, at the end of the day, this is just not an Iron Man that has any presence. I don't like the paint applications. I don't like the quality of it. I don't like the presence of it. It's not definitive or representative in any way. What does it truly offer? Besides being an Iron Man completionist, this is not a good Hot Toys figure. And continuing that trend, the next one on the list is the Iron Man Mark 27, which is the disco version, also from Iron Man 3. All the same arguments still are applicable. You have a blue and orange Iron Man here that does have a little bit unique of a color scheme. It has a unique design, that's for sure. It kind of looks like a Mark 7, kind of, but maybe slightly less bulky, but it's blue and orange. And these Iron Man paint variants are just not appealing to me whatsoever. They're not the type of figures that I feel like really just bring that much value to a collection. But that's just me. Everyone's going to be different. If you love Iron Man figures and you're a completionist and you have this, be happy, be prosperous. But for me, it's like, this is just such a throwaway suit. It really has no impact on the film whatsoever. And I don't even think it looks good. I don't like the paint applications on it. I don't like the color scheme on it. There's just nothing about this that I like. And next up, unsurprisingly, is the Hot Toys The Force Awakens Chewbacca. Guys, these are the prototype images. These are the images of what was promised to collectors. Not a bad figure, right? You look at the overall proportions, you look at the hair on this figure. I think overall it looks pretty solid. The likeness looks good. Of course, you have the blaster like always, you have the bandolier, everything looks pretty decent. However, that's not really what collectors ended up getting. Let me show you a picture here of what collectors really got in the final product. This is the Chewbacca really that came out to most collectors. This looks like third-party unlicensed Chewbacca. This does not quite look as it should. This doesn't look anything like the prototype. You just looked at the prototype photos. Now you're looking at the final product. Other collectors maybe had a little bit luckier of a go with this one, but short of brushing this guy thoroughly and getting him perfect, there was no saving this figure. And this is one of Hot Toys' worst outings as a company. It's just a failure every way you stack it. I mean, Jesus, looking at this thing compared to the other Chewbacca's, and hopefully the new Chewbacca on the market delivers the quality that's been promised, because it looks really good. This one does not. This one looks like Chewbacca. This is not at all Chewbacca. It's real rough. And next on the list is Avengers Infinity War, Captain America. Now, this is Captain America without his iconic shield. I love this look for Captain America because, for one, he has a beard, which I think is pretty unique and cool for the character. His suit is pretty tattered. He's been on the run. I, of course, love Avengers Infinity War. It's my favorite movie of all time. So for me, this is a very nostalgic Captain America. However, it is a huge miss. The shields were a huge pain in the ass to put on. Getting them around his hands without snapping that handle is quite the ordeal, so good luck with that one if you have this figure, if you intend to put the shield on. The head sculpt is just a miss. Look at that. I mean, I don't see Chris Evans anywhere in there. I had this figure for a little while and I tried to love it, and I did for a little while. But eventually over time, I knew that it just wasn't the Captain America that I needed in my collection. And you just look at this, the mustache looks a little bit awkward. The likeness doesn't look like Chris Evans, of course. At this time, they weren't really doing a lot of purrs. You couldn't really move the eyes too much. It doesn't have Captain America's shield. It's just in no way, shape, or form the Captain America that most collectors are going to need in their collection. Yeah, it's an iconic one because it's from an iconic film. It's, you know, Marvel at its peak with this in Endgame. But damn, that head sculpt looks nothing like Chris Evans at all. Let's keep the Infinity War train rolling. Next up, we have the Hot Toys Avengers Infinity War Black Widow. Now, this is a rooted hair figure, but this was prior to Hot Toys and their new artisan line, which is wool rooted implanted figure hair. And for this one, it has that old school Barbie hair, which Gamora has, which a lot of the Black Widows have, that just doesn't quite look that great. It looks pretty well styled here, actually, to be honest, in the final product blogger photos. But I can tell you, if you have it in your collection, it probably doesn't look anywhere near this good unless you took this thing to a salon. I don't really see a great likeness to Scarlett Johansson here. The blonde hair look, again, it's a one-off for Avengers Infinity War, which is not a bad look for the character, but it's like, the hair, even here, and this is as best as it's going to look. This is the best styling that Hot Toys can offer for this figure. It just looks very Barbie-like. It doesn't look natural in its rooting. It just looks like you plopped a wig and glued it on. Like that's really what it looks like here. And again, it's not necessarily the worst figure on the list here, but it is certainly one that is disappointing for Black Widow fans. And the next figure, I may ruffle some feathers with this one, is Dusty Deadpool. Look, guys, I love Deadpool as much as the next guy, but I don't need every single Deadpool in my collection, and I think most collectors are probably the same. They probably need one, tops two Deadpools, and this is certainly not it. The new Deadpool that just came out from Deadpool 3, Deadpool and Wolverine, is fantastic, and Hot Toys have already teased that they're going to be making another one, that it probably is going to include a head sculpt and be battle damaged in some way. I just don't know why Dusty Deadpool was ever a figure that really needed to be made. Maybe it was very cheap. Hot Toys just took the Deadpool 2 figure and repainted it and made it dusty looking. But for me, it's like, damn, this figure has no presence whatsoever. It doesn't really have that iconic of a moment in the film. Really, he gets dusty and then there's a joke at the end. I mean, I love Deadpool too, but I never really left the theater thinking, man, I need a Deadpool figure that's really dusty looking. Like, no, there was no point where I really felt that. It's not even really battle damage. It's more just like dusty, right? So I don't know. To me, this was like a move by Hot Toys to bring in more income because they know Deadpool's a top seller. They can reuse the body, make this one, super easy and cash in. But I just don't see the appeal of this one. Next on the list is the Hot Toys stealth suit Spider-Man from Spider-Man Far From Home, the Tom Holland stealth suit from the early stages of the film when he's fighting Mysterio illusions. Guys, this figure for me is just not at all it. I mean, there's nothing really Spider-Man about it. The goggles, I guess, somewhat have that Spider-Man vibe in the eyes to them. But again, this is just a generally black militaristic type Spider-Man suit with some armor over top, armor plating. And to me, the base, I guess, is kind of cool. The price this figure retailed for was pretty significant. I believe it was like over $300 because of the light up LED base. This figure ended up going for about $100 after a while because they overproduced it. It was a time of overproduction. and really no one wanted it. It's not the type of figure that really is going to grab that much attention in your display. It's not definitive by any stretch of the imagination because it barely even looks like Spider-Man. And while I love the film, I don't feel like this suit was really that integral to the story or the plot line. So for me, this is just another Spider-Man on Hot Toys docket. A Spider-Man figure can generally sell well enough to turn a profit, I'm sure. But and you don't have a Tom Holland head sculpt here, but geez, I mean, there's just not a lot to love about this figure. I don't think it has anything going for it that really stands it apart to other Spider-Man figures. And next up, we have the Hot Toys Harley Quinn caution tape jacket version from the Birds of Prey film. Now, my opinion of Birds of Prey pretty much aligns with the box office results. I'm not a huge fan of the film. I really didn't like it at all. I didn't see much value in it myself. I went in with an open mind. I was pretty excited about it. Ended up leaving very disappointed. I do like the character of Harley Quinn, but I don't think that Hot Toys does her justice with this figure. For one, I don't think the likeness really looks like Margot Robbie all that much. I don't see Margot Robbie in this figure, and I think the teeth and smile look a little bit awkward. It looks a little bit uncanny valley. So for me, I think that's a miss. Not only that, but you also have visible joints all over the place. Wrist joints, shoulder joints, knee joints, everything is visible here. And you can use the little, I guess, confetti pom-poms, I'm not sure what to call them, to cover things up a little bit, but most people are probably going to display their figures somewhat along the lines of this. And wow, this looks very toyish to me. This is personally not why I collect Hot Toys figures. I like that ultimate sense of realism, and this figure just doesn't give off those vibes. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Hot Toys Neon Tech Iron Man. Honestly, on this part of the list, any Neon Tech Iron Man. Pick your favorite, pick your least favorite, whatever the case may be, put it on this list. We're going to go with the Iron Man 2 Neon Tech Suit Up Gantry. I do not like any of the Neon Tech Iron Mans. They're not for me. I guess if you're an Iron Man completionist, I see why people would go for them. But I don't see the value in them personally. That's just me. Again, everyone's going to be different, but geez, I mean, there are so many great Iron Man figures that bring iconic representations to figure form, and this just isn't any of that. It's really just a spin-off, a thing that you never saw on screen. It's like a variant that has some blue Iron Man to it. I don't like any of the Neon Tech Iron Mans. They've become a little bit of a joke in the Hot Toys community, despite the fact that a lot of collectors still purchase them. And again, if you bought them and you love them, more power to you, man. Put that thing on display and enjoy it. But for me, I don't see the value in these figures besides making Hot Toys a quick buck and reusing old Iron Man parts to sell figures at a lower cost to a higher profit. I get it from a business standpoint. It makes sense. But from a collector standpoint, as someone who is detached from that, I just don't like these things personally. Next up is the Hot Toys Stan Lee Barber from Thor Ragnarok. Now, this was a 2020 Toy Fair exclusive, so I guess somewhat limited, but it never felt that way because this figure was always in stock. No matter what, whenever you went on Sideshow, whenever you went to your local comic book store, you could find this figure. Sideshow at one point was giving it away for free. They were adding it to your cart for free to say, please take this thing. And collectors were still saying, remove from cart. That's how little people wanted it. At the end of the day, look, it's a Stan Lee figure. So if you really need one, this is probably a good one to target because you're going to get it for like $35. But the one from the chair, I think, is the one that most collectors are going for, albeit much more expensive these days. But still, that's kind of what you're looking at if you're looking for the definitive iconic representation for Stan Lee in Hot Toys figure form. Look, I like Thor Ragnarok as much as the next guy. I like that Stan Lee used to appear in these films. It was always fun and engaging. But for me, this figure just... there's nothing about it that really has it stand out on your shelf. Like, I mean, if you're going to get Stan Lee, you're going to get the one with the chair, right? If you're getting one at all. And this is the type of figure I think that just really is the definition of a peg warmer. Next up on the list, unsurprisingly, is Hot Toys Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Look, I'm not the biggest Back to the Future fan in the world, but this boy has holes in his head. Hot Toys decided to ship this figure out with holes in his head. These originally were for glasses that don't even come with this figure. Hot Toys said, you know what? Don't bother filling those holes. Just ship it, right? That is a travesty. For Back to the Future fans, that is a huge deal. And of course, you have the box here, the plutonium box here, that is actually made of cardboard. On the shelf, I've said that before, you're probably not going to notice a huge difference. But over time, I've kind of softened on that stance and said, okay, like, you don't have to use premium materials, but that is a little cheap on Hot Toys' part. I don't think it really even looks that much like Christopher Lloyd. I know the expression is something he does make often in the film, but it's a little bit exaggerated and pretty one note, right? Like, what can you do beyond that expression? I would have liked to have seen maybe a more standard expression or maybe a second head sculpt that's a little less expressive so you can do more with him and have more versatility. this figure as it stands is just a major disappointment for Back to the Future fans. This is a very important character in pop culture, and Einstein he looks like a big hunk of plastic. Like this figure just all around is just not quite up to the level that it should be, the standard that it should be for Back to the Future fans, which there's a lot of those out there. This is a reused Mark 50. Hot Toys made 8,000 million Iron Man Mark 50s, and they decided to repurpose a lot of them that didn't sell and make it into an Iron Strange. Fine, from a business standpoint, it makes sense. From a figure collector standpoint, I do not see the purpose in this whatsoever. For collectors, maybe who have a comic affinity, and maybe this did appear in the comics at some point. I'm sure it did. Everything ever at any point has happened in the comics, I know. But look, as more of a cinematic MCU collector, this figure just is not it. I mean, the Mark 50 is a cool suit. I like the design of it. It's not the best figure that Hot Toys has ever made from an Iron Man standpoint. And putting a Doctor Strange head sculpt is not going to fix that problem. It's not going to remedy that position or that error. But I mean, just look, if you want a Doctor Strange figure, for me, like, you would get a Doctor Strange figure, but getting an Iron Strange, like, I don't see much value in this one personally, but to the collectors who really want this, I mean, it's a concept figure. If you want something unique in your collection, sure, but I just think there's so many better options than this. I mean, taking a suit that's not even that popular to most fans and putting a Doctor Strange head sculpt on it, like, it's kind of like a neon tech to me. Next up, could be a controversial choice on this list here, is the Hot Toys snowsuit from the Black Widow solo film. Guys, this figure, it doesn't do justice to Black Widow either. There have been so many subpar to below subpar even Black Widow figures, and I'm glad that the Hot Toys Artisan figure now exists to hopefully do justice to a very beloved character. The head sculpt is quite large due to the hairpiece. It looks a little bit bobblehead-like here in the blogger photos and in reviews I've seen. And of course, the white suit is pretty cool. I like it. It has a cool moment in the film in the escape scene, you know, and rescuing Red Guardian from the prison. But I just think the head sculpt is a major miss. That's my primary focus and issue that I take with this figure. It doesn't look like Scarlett Johansson. The hairpiece looks very plasticky. I don't like how that sits on the figure. I don't think the head sculpt is properly scaled. I think this character deserves better. And while the suit is pretty cool, again, if you're going to get a Black Widow, you probably wouldn't just get the white suit. You might get the black suit that's a little bit more iconic and representative and definitive. Maybe you like Black Widow enough to get multiple versions, but for me, even if so, this one just, it doesn't really scream realism and high end to me. It looks more like a toy of Scarlett Johansson, which again, every collector is different in what they want, but that's just not why I collect Hot Toys personally. So for me, yeah, I'm gonna have to pass this Black Widow. Next up, we have the Hot Toys Matrix Resurrections Neo. Guys, this is just a travesty. This is a travesty of a figure. They clearly took the John Wick Chapter 2 head sculpt, put a new hairpiece on it, gave him a black t-shirt and a black trench coat and some little plastic sort of bullet stopping effects, and that was it. Hot Toys clearly half-assed this figure because they knew that the film was half-assed. It's not a very good installment into the Matrix franchise. And Hot Toys knew that, and they knew this figure probably wouldn't sell, but they were like, we love Keanu, we love Johnny Depp, let's make Keanu and you know, give people a Matrix figure, despite the fact that we know it's probably not going to sell all that well. If you made a Matrix 1 Neo, I think, or Matrix trilogy, honestly, Matrix 2 or Matrix 3, it probably would sell really well. But to make the older Neo from a film that's pretty ass, like, it's not going to go over too well. And there's nothing about this figure that really has any sort of presence whatsoever. It's a guy in some black pants and a black trench coat, and it doesn't even look as cool as the original Neo. The original Neo had way more presence and had all those weapons and accessories and a really cool base, and this just has none of that. It has none of the presence, has a really subpar head sculpt for Keanu Reeves, and I mean, geez, the glasses are too big. Like, this is just a miss and L at every turn. And next, another potentially controversial choice, we have the Hot Toys Mace Windu figure. Now, collectors have long waited for a Hot Toys Mace Windu figure. We've theorized, we've speculated for many years now about the potential of a Mace Windu figure, and Hot Toys finally delivered one from the Attack of the Clones line. Problem being, it looks like the Toys era, Toys Master, whatever it is, version of Samuel L. Jackson. I see a decent resemblance to Samuel L. Jackson, but certainly the likeness is not there to the degree that it needs to be. I don't look at this and say, wow, that's Samuel L. Jackson, every angle. I see it, right? Which I think they should be able to nail a Samuel L. head sculpt. They've already done it with Nick Fury figures before, but apparently with this one, not so much. You have normal Jedi attire. This is just pretty standard for all of the figures. So it all comes down to the head sculpt, really, because all the Jedi stuff is typically pretty similar to the next version. And the head sculpt is a miss, right? Head sculpt is a total miss. Look at that. I mean, that does not look like Samuel L. Jackson. I don't know who that's supposed to be, but it's not Samuel L. Jackson. And for me, if you have a Mace Windu figure and you're glad you got that representation, fantastic. I'm happy for you as a collector to have that. I'd rather you have it than not, but I'd also rather Hot Toys deliver a figure to the quality that I know they're capable of and deliver a Mace Windu that is definitive and looks like the actual character and actor. And I don't feel like they've done that here. I think this head sculpt is a major L. And next, we have the Hot Toys WB100 Batman. Guys, this figure is a travesty from an artistry standpoint. It has blue, it has black/gray color schemes, a blue cow. This is not it. I'm sorry. I don't know how much detail I can go into with this one. You have bats that are kind of cool, I guess. They can fly around Bruce there, but I mean, geez. You have a blue collar, a blue cow. You have some lighter gray and black armoring. This is like kind of a DX19 repaint, it looks like to me. But again, if you have this figure and you love it, fantastic. I know I keep saying that, but I really don't want to yuck anyone's yum. If you enjoyed this figure, fantastic. But for me, I just don't see it. I just don't see why this Batman figure would appeal to most collectors. I think there's so many other good Batman figures that are cooler and better and more iconic. If you want something unique that other collectors don't have, sure, I could see the argument for that. But from an artistry standpoint, a presence standpoint, a quality standpoint, I just don't see it with this figure. I don't think the color scheme works at all. It's just too much. It's too much going on. He looks like Batman the Hot Mess. Like I don't get it personally, but to each their own. Unfortunately, I had to add these two amazing characters to the list. So this is the Rocket and Cosmo 2-pack from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now, to me, it's difficult because these are characters that are primarily composed of hair. They're a raccoon and a dog, you know, first and foremost, but they are sculpted figures at the end of the day because rooting them would be very difficult. The problem with making them sculpted is they end up looking like plastic toys. These look more like Marvel Legends to me than they do Hot Toys figures. They look very sculpted, very plasticky, very toyish. They don't quite have that realism or lifelike aspect that I'm looking for on my shelf that really blends in with the rest of my Marvel or other figures that I, intend to display in my collection room. So to me, again, this looks like apparently it's not. It looks like a reuse of the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 head sculpt with slightly different paint application. I'm glad that collectors are getting a team suit Rocket, but to me, I think the head sculpt is a major miss. The body is fine, the suit is fine, proportions, tailoring, all that is good. Same goes with Cosmo. Everything appears to be good except for the fact that it doesn't look lifelike. It looks very plasticky and toyish like something you'd get from Target, right? Which is why I'm not really keen on paying over $200 for a set like this, because it just doesn't really scream lifelike or Hot Toys ultimate sense of realism to me. Hyper realistic, right? That's the end of the day what I'm looking for in my collection primarily. And these figures just don't do that for me. I feel like the paint applications are not that strong on this Rocket figure. I don't like the likeness. Cosmo feels, again, very toyish and cheap looking. So unfortunately, I'm just gonna have to include these guys on the list despite them being really cool and fun characters. I love Rocket, but I've yet to see a Hot Toys figure that I feel like does him complete justice. Maybe the Endgame figure is the closest one. I think the scarf look is pretty cool for the character. But for me, I'm just not quite feeling this version of Rocket. I think it might be the worst one they've done so far, which is kind of not that exciting. But that's that, guys. That's my whole list. Make sure to comment down below. Let me know where you agreed with the video. Let me know where you disagreed. Let me know if you have some figures in your collection that you think should have belonged on this list or that you've owned before or that, you just think are really bad Hot Toys figures that you want to include in this conversation. And make sure, guys, to let me know, politely and respectfully if there, again, are areas where you disagree with me. If there are figures on this list that you have that you love, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I would love to hear it. And other than that, I think we had a good time going through this list. I hope it didn't come across as too negative. I think these videos are just fun to do every so often. But again, most Hot Toys figures are absolutely incredible works of art. And these ones just don't quite live up to that standard of quality, in my opinion. But again, make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and of course, click the notification bell so you're notified when lots of content goes live here, reviews, live streams, big picture videos, fun stuff like this. They're not always this negative, I promise, but every once in a while, it's okay to vent, and that's what we're doing here today. Guys, thank you so much for joining. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out. See you later. Bye.